this. It's the Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome into the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Hopefully you guys are having a nice week. NCAA Big Ten tournament starts up today, 3:30. We got basketball games, so it's going to be good. Obviously, Purdue and Indiana playing tomorrow, but that is not the lead for today. Yesterday, the Colts signed Daniel Jones to be the quarterback competition for the Indianapolis Colts. And I feel pretty confident that this isn't going to be a real competition. I feel like the whole point of this whole, being loud about a quarterback competition and bringing in, a guy like Daniel Jones, who's had some success, but, got benched for Tommy DeVito last year. Like that's, not really competition. Okay, the whole point of pushing this narrative, I believe, is to get Anthony Richardson just to kind of get his butt in gear, to get him to show up at training camp ready to go. That is the whole point of this open competition. It's to make sure that Anthony Richardson is good to go, which is kind of sad. You would think that you wouldn't have to do that for an NFL quarterback, but given what we know about Anthony Richardson and just kind of the childishness that he possesses, you have to do things like this. That's the whole point. I feel like I've covered this pretty extensively ever since all of this competition stuff just kind of started. The Colts were never going to bring in a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers or Justin Fields or Sam Darnold. Actually, probably not Justin Fields, but they weren't going to bring in a guy that felt like a legitimate starter because they want Anthony Richardson to be the starting quarterback. And because of that, he's going to start week 1 for the Indianapolis Colts. Okay, I'm like 99% sure about that. And, people are going to talk about this open competition and training camp and all that kind of stuff. It's not an open competition. Okay, that is not what this is. If this competition was like a door, the door would be slightly cracked. Okay, like it's almost closed on Anthony Richardson being the starter. Anthony Richardson is going to get every benefit of the doubt from the Colts and this coaching staff and this front office because they don't want to be wrong about the number 4 overall pick. If Daniel Jones were to beat Anthony Richardson out in camp, first and foremost, I would be stunned. Secondly, it would indicate that Anthony Richardson didn't get better this offseason. It would probably indicate that he somehow, some way got worse, which feels really hard to believe. Daniel Jones, though, will have an opportunity to win the job at some point during the season. Because, look, Anthony Richardson has been here long enough that we all know what's going to happen. The Colts are going to call some sort of read option. Anthony Richardson's going to pull it. And he's going to take off running, and he's not going to slide, and he's going to get hurt, and then he's going to be out for 4 weeks. And then Daniel Jones is going to have 4 weeks, a month, to run the offense and prove that he's the better quarterback. Okay? That isn't going to happen during training camp because training camp is it's a lot of shorts. Okay? It's a lot of just helmets. And yes, while you can learn things about players during that time, you don't really learn until games actually start. So in those 3 or 4 weeks during the season when Anthony Richardson sidelined with a rib injury, Daniel Jones will have an opportunity during that time to win the job. If he comes in and he takes this offense to another level, then he can take the job from Anthony Richardson. Okay, because let's just be honest. Even if Anthony Richardson comes back better, okay, I don't expect him to make some huge leap and all of a sudden the Colts are running, or all of a sudden the Colts have like a top 5 offense in the NFL. It's not what I'm expecting. I don't think that's a fair expectation of a guy who just completed 48% of his passes last year. If Anthony Richardson comes back and he's better, he'll probably complete somewhere between 55 and 60% of his passes, and the offense will be somewhere kind of in the middle of the road. And if Daniel Jones comes in, and if all of a sudden the Colts go from having the 17th best offense in the NFL to the 9th best offense in the NFL, then they probably aren't going to take out Daniel Jones. That is how Daniel Jones is going to take the job from Anthony Richardson. It's not going to happen during training camp. Once again, if it does, I'll be really surprised. If Daniel Jones takes this job from Anthony Richardson, it'll happen during the season. If it happens at all. Okay, it'll happen when Anthony Richardson misses time with an injury. Okay, the Colts forked out $14 million for a backup quarterback. That's the reality of it. Or at least that's how it's going to start. Maybe it changes, but as of right now, that's really kind of what it looks like. And why Daniel Jones? Right? Like, why him? Why not Jameis Winston? Why not who else was available out there? Why not Kirk Cousins, another guy who's had more success really than Daniel Jones has had? Why not Russell Wilson? Why one of those guys? Like, why not one of them? Why did they end up with Daniel Jones? Haven't done one of these in a while, but I have a short conspiracy corner as to why the Indianapolis Colts decided to sign Daniel Jones over all of the other options that they had at quarterback this offseason. Conspiracy corner. The reason why the Indianapolis Colts drafted Daniel Jones is because they wanted to get back in the good graces of Peyton Manning. And you say, Jonathan, what does Daniel Jones, Peyton Manning, how do those guys link? How do those guys connect? Do you remember why Daniel Jones was drafted 6th overall by the New York Giants? I remember when it happened, people went crazy because Dwayne Haskins was still on the board. And everyone thought that the Giants were going to take Dwayne Haskins, a guy who set all of these Big Ten records, beat Drew Brees, for all these Big Ten records when he played at Ohio State. And, Dwayne Haskins to the Giants felt like it was undoubtedly going to happen. And then the Giants were like, no, we're going to take Daniel Jones. And the reason why was because he had this stamp of approval from the Manning brothers. Daniel Jones played at Duke. Eli Manning and Peyton Manning used to go to Duke in the off seasons, and they would work out with whoever the quarterback's coach was at Duke University, right? So they knew Daniel, and they saw Daniel, and Daniel saw them, and I'm sure that Daniel Jones worked out with them some, and pretty much Eli Manning goes to the Giants and is like, hey, this guy's pretty good. And so the Giants were like, okay, we will gladly take him. So the galaxy brain take, the conspiracy theory take on why the Colts signed Daniel Jones is because he has a good relationship with the Mannings. I have to be fully honest though when it comes to this move. I don't really like it. I don't think I get it. Like, you want to create competition. I just wish that the Colts would have just wrote it out with Anthony Richardson. I wish the Colts had taken that $14 million and put it somewhere else. In terms of winning, this doesn't do anything for the Colts. Okay, like whether Anthony Richardson or Daniel Jones is your starting quarterback, the ceiling of your season doesn't move that much. It doesn't. They could have gone cheaper. They could have brought in Jameis Winston to be a high-end backup because, once again, that's what Daniel Jones is. And it's also something that you have to have with Anthony Richardson on your team due to the injury history that we've seen him have throughout his very, very short time in the NFL, going back to his time at Florida, even going back to high school. As I've said, I don't think this is a real competition. And if I'm right, then it feels like the Colts wasted some of their money. I would have much preferred the Colts take that $14 million and sign like a good football player. Joey Bosa signed with the Buffalo Bills yesterday for around $12.5 million. That's a guy who would have undoubtedly played for the Indianapolis Colts. Okay, the Colts still have a lot of needs. Like, they have positions that greatly need to be addressed. And spending $14 million on a backup quarterback feels like a waste. And there's guys that are still they're still available, by the way, that the Colts could go get. Mekhi Becton, offensive guard for the Philadelphia Eagles, was like a former number 10 overall pick, played tackle for the Jets, and then the Eagles went and got him. They're like, nah, you're going to play offensive guard. He was pretty good. He's still available. He's still out there on the market. Another guy, pretty similar, signed, drafted as an offensive tackle, couldn't cut it at tackle, so they moved him inside to guard. That's Tevin Jenkins. Both of those guys, Mekhi Becton and Tevin Jenkins, are a little younger, around the age of 27. Colts could still sign those guys, and I'm sure having an extra, $14 million would make it a little easier. Colts still probably need another wide receiver. Okay, Amari Cooper, he's still on the market. Like, that's a guy that $14 million towards would be kind of nice. And part of me gets it. Okay, like, I get that Chris Ballard had to follow up on what he said that he'd do, because he's all about integrity and following through and all that kind of stuff. And if you say that you're going to do something and then you don't do it, that kind of goes against this whole integrity thing that Chris Ballard is really all about. But my thing is, like, he could have gone to one of his excuses. Takes to the tango. We wanted to pay. I'm not going to say their name because that's what he would say. Like, we wanted to pay so and so this much money, but they wanted this much. We just didn't think that he was worth that. And my thing is, like, once Justin Fields went to the Jets, once Sam Darnold went to Seattle, once it became pretty clear that Aaron Rodgers was going to sign with Pittsburgh, which is still what is supposed to happen, even though apparently he's been talking to the Vikings as well. But I just really feel like the Vikings would want to move on and kind of start this J.J. McCarthy era of things. I feel like once all of those things happened and the Aaron Rodgers thing became pretty apparent, I just don't think that Colts would have cared anymore. Because I do think that, from what I've read, I feel like most Colts fans agree with me when I say that this doesn't really seem like much of a quarterback competition. So as soon as those like high-profile targets, guys that really could have pushed the envelope when it comes to whether or not you start Anthony Richardson, as soon as those guys went off the board, I don't think people cared as much. I think that Chris Ballard could have gotten away with it, especially if he'd allocated that money that he spent on Daniel Jones to a position of need, like offensive guard, pass rushing depth, linebacker, so on and so forth. If this isn't a real quarterback competition, like I don't think that it is, then it feels like a waste of money that could have been better spent on, like I said, on a position that's actually going, or on a player that's actually going to see the field this year, like Joey Bosa. Zach Hicks is set to join the show coming up here at 11 o'clock. It's going to be great because when Zach Hicks comes on, it's always fun. Smart guy, does his homework, which I greatly, greatly appreciate. So he's coming up at 11 o'clock. Got just a big show today. A lot of Colts. Pacers Bucks last night. Fantastic. It was so much fun watching that game. Back and forth. Really kind of set the tone for the rest of March. I've got some stuff on Purdue. Braden Smith, he's your Big Ten Player of the Year. The Big Ten tournament, that starts today, right? So I've got a couple of predictions about the tournament that I'm going to make, and I can't wait. I think this is going to be one of the best Big Ten tournaments that we've seen in quite some time, and I can't wait. So coming up here in about 45 minutes, Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts just talking about all the different moves that the Colts have made so far in free agency. Pacers Bucks, I'm going to get into that probably in about 30 minutes or so. Actually, no, probably more like 20 minutes or so. And then I'll get into the Big Ten tournament probably in about 30 minutes. But when we come back in about 4 minutes, free agency is doing something very important to the Colts. And I just really hope that Chris Ballard is taking notes on all the impacts the free agency have had on this franchise in the last 3 days, because they're good, positive things, not just for the team, not just for the fan base, but for Chris Ballard himself. And I'm going to tell you what those things are when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
If it's in today's sports world, it's here. The real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indie Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indies Sports Ticket. Hopefully you guys are having a nice week. I know I am. Things are rolling along here. I do want to continue talking about the Colts and free agency. And like I said before the break, I hope Chris Ballard is just noting all of these different things that are happening as he continues to address free agency. Okay? Because it's done a couple of good things for the Colts. First and foremost, it's created a little bit of excitement. It has. It creates excitement around your team when you add players that are actually good during the offseason. I am more excited to watch this Colts defense now than I was last year. And we haven't even gotten to the NFL draft yet, where hopefully Chris Ballard is going to continue to bring in good players. Okay, I'm excited to see this Colts defense because they actually got better, which is a good thing. And I think that there are other fans out there that, like me, are a little more excited about the season now because they actually brought in some legitimately good football players. The other thing that it does is it makes drafting easier. It's going to be so much easier now in that war room while they're trying to figure out who to take, because they actually address some needs. And now instead of having to address all of their needs in the draft, they only have to address some of them. And because of that, it makes my life a little bit easier too. I think I'm going to be able to figure out who they're going to take with that 14th pick sooner rather than later now. Because the Colts, like, their options have narrowed down now. They still need a tight end. They still need a linebacker. They still need an offensive guard. And they still need pass rushing depth. I think those are probably the four most important things for the Colts to continue to address throughout this offseason, okay? Because this whole tight end by committee thing, not really working. EJ Speed, they didn't re-sign him. So they need someone else to kind of be able to play that weak side linebacker spot. I was really hoping that they'd be able to go get Dre Greenlaw, but he's going to Denver. He's going to play there. They still need an offensive guard. Don't blame them for not wanting to bring Will Fries back on a 5-year, $88 million contract. So like they need to address that. And then with Dio Adangbo leaving, I know some people are not upset by that at all. Like, they did lose depth. They did lose a player that you could put in on third down and could go get the passer. So they need a little bit more depth. And guess what? They can address all of those positions in the first 4 rounds and get probably pretty decent players. If I had to guess right now, they'd probably go offensive guard in the first round. Second round, probably go tight end because there's a lot of really good tight ends in this draft class. Third round, they'd probably go linebacker. Maybe you flip the second and third round. Maybe they go linebacker in the second round and then tight end in the third. We'll kind of see. And then in the fourth round, they can add, some pass rushing depth. And then they can use the 5th, 6th, and 7th round like normal teams do. They can use it to build some depth and address special teams. Okay? Look at the Colts operating more and more like a normal franchise every single day. It's great. It really, really is. Okay? Like, that's what those, 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks are for. They are there to build depth and address your special teams. Okay? Those first 4 rounds, though, like, you're especially those first 3, you're really hoping to find starters. In the 4th round, you're hoping to find a starter, but at a minimum, build some depth there. That's what the Colts are going to be able to do in this year's draft because they actually used free agency. It's great. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Speaking of beautiful, beautiful things, how about a Tyrese Halliburton 4-point play last night to win a game that they really needed to win? They'd lost 3 in a row. Playing the Bucks, you've got them at home, and it was just, what a game. What a game. Tyrese Halliburton saved himself a ton of flack. I mean, I was sitting on my couch last night watching the game very, very intently because it was a great game. If you didn't watch it, you missed it. What was an excellent game. And like the first 3 quarters, he's just kind of floating along. He'd only taken 7 shots through 3 quarters, which just isn't enough for him. And I'm just like, you know what? Like, I'm gonna rip this dude tomorrow. Because like the impact didn't really feel like it was there. Sure, he had 9 assists going into that fourth quarter. He, was impactful on the defensive end, so I will give him credit for that. But like he has to be better than what he was in those first three quarters last night. Okay, so he goes into the fourth quarter. He's got 6 points on 2 of 7 shooting. As I said, he did have 9 assists going into the fourth quarter, and defensively, he'd been good. Like, he's not out there, locking people up one-on-one, but he was rarely out of position, and that allowed him to help force some turnovers, tip some passes, which led to some easy fast break points. Okay, he finished the game with 14 points and 10 assists. He took 5 shots in that fourth quarter. Okay, but just to be quite frank, it felt like a very average game from Tyrese Halliburton. And when you're playing against the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis Antetokounmpo, one of the 5 best players in the world, it's really hard to win when your best player's average. Luckily, the Pacers did an excellent job of keeping Giannis in check. They just showed 2 the entire game. Like, he caught the ball. It's like, we are going to double you. Halliburton was usually the guy who doubled. Like, they were totally fine with letting Taurean Prince beat them, which is a great strategy. Like, if Taurean Prince goes for 30, then you say, okay, Taurean, I don't think, like, that's fine, right? But what you can't allow is what had happened the previous 14 times Giannis had played against the Pacers. Before last night, so in 14 out of his last 15 games against the Pacers, Giannis had just been dominant. He'd scored 30 or more in every game but one. He'd scored 50 or more in 3 of them, including that 64-point game last year where, he accused the Pacers of taking the ball because, he wanted it because it was like his career high, but the Pacers took it because some rookie, I forget who it was, the power forward out of, Kentucky who could really rebound, but like he scored his first NBA point. So I guess it's a thing where, like when you score your first NBA points, they let you keep the ball. So Giannis like runs into their locker room trying to take the ball back, and he'd had the real ball the whole time. It was just a whole mess. So that happened last year, 64 on the Pacers' head. And he'd had 10 plus rebounds in every game but one. He had dominated the Pacers, and he was still really good last night because he's, like I said, he's one of the 5 best players in the world. You're not going to stop him. But he only scored 19 points. That's big whenever you're playing against the Bucks. He did have 17 rebounds, and he did have 7 assists. But that's what you want to make Giannis do. The Pacers made him a passer last night, and it worked really well for them. They held the Bucks to 113 points. When you're playing against a team led by Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo, and you hold them to 113 points, that is a good defensive game. They did an excellent job last night, the Pacers did, playing defense. And ultimately, it's why they won, because offensively, I didn't think they were great. I didn't think that they were terrible either, though. Halliburton, I'm giving him a hard time because I just didn't think that he played great last night. He had some shots go in and out. As a team, I didn't feel like they shot the ball great, especially from 3. They were only 13 of 39 from 3. They did, shoot really well inside the lane because, they shot 51% from the floor as a team. So, like, the offense, good, not great. They won that game, though, because of their defense and their ability to limit the impact that Giannis had with his scoring. In addition to that, Pascal Siakam was awesome last night. 25 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists, 25 points, 12 rebounds, and 5 assists. As I said, Halliburton in those first 3 quarters just wasn't as impactful as he can be, or as he should have been. But that's okay, because Pascal Siakam in those first 3 quarters was great when Halliburton really struggled, just getting to his spots, finishing well at the rim, hitting open threes. He was 3 of 7 from 3 on the game, and 10 of 15 from the floor overall. Like, he was just efficient and in the right spots and scoring, and he was charged with guarding Giannis for stretches, which is not an easy thing to do, even when they're sending help every time he touches the ball. And I thought his passing was good. Those 5 assists, like, that's a pretty solid number for him. Like, he played just an all-around great game last night. And he's just been so big for the Pacers the last year and a half. I don't think you can really understate how impactful he's been, because Halliburton has these stretches where you don't really realize him. And it seems like most of the time, not all the time, during those points of games, Siakam's like, okay, Halliburton, like you're clearly fading here. Let me shoulder the load a little bit for these, next 4 minutes. Okay. And we saw him do that at the start of the fourth quarter as well. Halliburton's on the bench. It's Siakam. He's out there with some second unit guys. And he got the Pacers off to an amazing start in that fourth quarter. It starts, the game's tied. It's 88-88. And he just comes out and generated so many good looks. For the first 3 minutes of the fourth quarter, Pascal Siakam scored or assisted on all 11 points in those first 3 minutes. And that start was big because the Bucks were scoring the ball as well. And it was really important for the Pacers to get off to that really good start that they got off to yesterday in that fourth quarter. Okay. And so he, like I said, and then from there, Halliburton comes in, he just kind of takes over, scored 8 points in the fourth quarter. He scored 8 points in the fourth quarter. He took 5 shots, which I appreciate. Like when he's aggressive, the Pacers offense is better. That's just the very simple reality of it. Obviously he hits that 4-point play late in the game for them to win. But just an outstanding game last night. And the Pacers felt like the Pacers. Halliburton with 10 assists, Siakam kind of scoring from that mid-post area, and the bench being great because the Pacers bench last night was awesome. Mathurin had 17 points. Thomas Bryant had 10 points off the bench, and TJ McConnell had 12 points. But it was a great TJ McConnell game. 12 points, 7 assists. He had 4 steals. One of them, someone missed a shot. I think it may have been him. And he turns around like he's heading back on defense, but then he jumps in front of Damian Lillard and he steals it and he gets a layup. Just doing like little annoying TJ McConnell stuff. Like that's what he did last night. And it was so great. He had a couple bursts, these little short 2-minute stretches where he just really took the game over. So great game from the Pacers bench last night, but especially TJ McConnell. His impact couldn't be. It was so important for the Pacers to win that game, and a guy who's probably going to be made fun of today, Andrew Nembhard. He played well. He just missed shots late. He missed two big threes late, which would have given the Pacers a 1-point lead. But he comes back down, goes to the rim, gets fouled. It's like, all right, he's going to go to the line here if he makes both. Game's tied with 30 seconds left. Here we go. Misses the first, makes the second. Okay. And, I won't talk about it too much because the Pacers won. But the real reason why I'm bringing him up is, I talked about it. He'd really been struggling offensively, and he didn't last night. 4 of 6 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3. Okay, 3 assists, which is, a little low for him. And he finished with 12 points. Like the Pacers need that production from him if he's going to start. But most importantly, they need his defense. And his defense was amazing. There's some Pacers account on Twitter that is nicknamed Nemhell because that's what these guys go through whenever they're defended by Andrew Nembhard. Okay, Damian Lillard just couldn't get it going. Andrew Nembhard locked that dude up all the way. Damian Lillard finished the night with 15 points on 4 of 14 shooting, and the impact that Andrew Nembhard has had on the defensive end of the floor this year has been huge for them. And it's a large part of why the Pacers are so much better defensively this year. It's because Andrew Nembhard in the offseason, I don't know how you get better at defense, but Andrew Nembhard figured out a way to do it. And he has just taken the opposing team's best guard and has done a really good job defensively all year. And we had another really impressive performance from him last night in a game that the Pacers really needed to win. There is now a 4-way or a 3-way tie for the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference between the Pistons, Bucks, and Indiana Pacers. The Bucks and Pacers will play again on Saturday, if I remember correctly, the Pacers are off today. They play the 76ers on Friday. Yep, and then they'll turn around on Saturday and they will rematch the Bucks in Milwaukee. That game should once again be great because this is kind of a rivalry now. And whenever these two teams meet, like the intensity is just up a little bit, and you could feel it in that game last night. Once again, hopefully you stayed up and watched it on TNT. But college basketball, it's in full swing. It's March. And the Big Ten tournament, that starts today. Braden Smith, your Big Ten player of the year, as he should have been. There's one stat in particular that completely and totally justifies Braden Smith being the Big Ten player of the year. I'm going to tell you what that is when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
It may, one day, be a must-listen for sports enthusiasts.
Yeah, and monkeys might fly out of my butt.
Uh-oh. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Indy Sports Ticket, if you want to head over there and subscribe. Maybe you're watching on Twitter, __ Jonathan Smith, if you want to watch there. Or maybe you're listening via that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps. Coming up here in about 20 minutes, Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts is set to join the show. We'll talk Colts and just everything that they've done in this offseason. Big Ten tournament starts today. It was announced yesterday, though, that Braden Smith is your Big Ten Player of the Year, as he should have been. Like, clearly. He was clearly the best player. 7th in the Big Ten in scoring at 16.4 points per game. He averaged 2.5 steals per game, which was second best in the Big Ten. Here's the big thing, though. Here's the one stat that I would point to if you ask me, Jonathan, John Tanji was good and Wisconsin as a team was better. How about, one of the guys from Michigan State or maybe Danny Wolf, all those teams finished in front of Purdue. Shouldn't it be someone who didn't finish 6th in the Big Ten? No, it shouldn't, because Braden Smith broke Magic Johnson's record for the average number of assists per game in a single season. Crazy. If you're breaking records set by Magic Johnson almost 50 years ago, 40 years ago, then you should win Big Ten Player of the Year. Braden Smith averaged 8.8 assists per game, which tops Magic Johnson's previous record of 8.4 in the 1978-79 season. When you break records like that, and you're one of the two engines that your team has to have to go to actually even be capable of winning any game, then, you should probably win Big Ten Player of the Year of whatever conference you're in. So congrats to Braden Smith. He was, clearly the option to win that award. Trey Coffin-Wren, he was named, to the first team All Big Ten team as well with Braden Smith, as he should have been. Which now I have to ask a question that I don't really want to ask. Is this Purdue roster bad? I feel like we've been avoiding this question all year. I feel like I've said it without saying it a million times of, Braden Smith and Trey Coffin-Wren have to be great in order to give Purdue a chance. And, all those other guys, they're kind of up and down. And will you get enough production from the other guys? Asking questions like that consistently. Is this Purdue roster bad? They have 2 first-team All Big Ten players, and they finished 6th in the Big Ten. It's not great. It's just, if this roster around them was just a little bit better, then, do they win the Big Ten? Are we talking about them as a team that could maybe make the Final Four again? Because they're definitely not that this year. I don't know, but they are good enough to win the Big Ten tournament. I don't think they will. I'll tell you why here in a moment. The Big Ten tournament starts today. Northwestern at Minnesota. That game's at 3:30 here at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. All these games are taking place here in the great, city of Indianapolis. Iowa, they play Ohio State at 6. And then the nightcap, Rutgers versus USC. Purdue fans, you're going to want to keep track of that one because the winner of Rutgers and USC will play against Purdue tomorrow night. So I got a couple, not predictions, really just kind of categories. If I had to pick a dark horse team to win the Big Ten tournament, I would pick Oregon. I think Oregon's really good. I think they're tough. I think they defend incredibly well, especially on the inside with Nate Biddle. Okay, and I know Indiana fans, you probably hate that I just said that Oregon's my dark horse to win this whole thing. I love their guards. I think they're big, they're physical, they can get to the rim, and they shoot the ball pretty well as a team. They're not a great shooting team, but they're also not Michigan State level either. Okay, like they can shoot it. They can get to the rim. I think they're really good on the defensive end of the floor. So my dark horse to win the Big Ten tournament would be Oregon. Will they? Probably not, because they have to beat Indiana, who's playing really well right now. And then they had to beat Michigan State. That's the way that this bracket shakes out. So there's your dark horse. I would say it's Oregon. Now, who I'm picking to win the Big Ten, I'm picking Wisconsin. Wisconsin can score the ball as well as anyone in the Big Ten. They run beautiful offense. And when you can score the ball consistently in college basketball, you can beat everyone, especially in a Big Ten conference where the offenses this year, like I just don't think have been that great. Wisconsin also kind of known for what they do on the defensive end of the floor. So, like, you know that's going to show up at some point during this tournament. So I'm going to take Wisconsin to win the tournament. I'm going to go off the board there. I feel like a lot of people are picking Michigan or just any one of the top 4 seeds, because those are the teams with the buys. And usually if you have more buys, your chances of winning the whole thing are just better. Okay. So my prediction winner is Wisconsin because of how they can score. The basketball player of the tournament, since I'm picking Wisconsin, I'm going to go with John Tanji, a dude who can just flat out score it, man. Like that dude can just straight up score the basketball. So there's that. And I am more excited about the Big Ten tournament than I've been in quite some time because there's not a clear best team in the Big Ten tournament. There's not a team like Purdue last year that was clearly good enough to make it to the Final Four. Obviously, Michigan State's good, but they don't seem like they're going to make the Final Four. Like, they just don't seem to measure up with the Auburns and Dukes of the college basketball world. Okay. And then, so Michigan State's ceiling kind of feels like it's the Elite Eight, as does it feel with a lot of other teams in this conference. Like, if Maryland made an Elite Eight, I don't think you'd be surprised. If Wisconsin made an Elite Eight, I don't think anyone would be surprised. If Michigan or Illinois or Purdue made an Elite Eight, I don't think people would be very surprised. If Oregon made a run or UCLA made a run to the Elite Eight, you'd be a little more surprised than any of those other teams that I mentioned. But I don't think that it's out of the realm of possibilities. There's several teams in this Big Ten tournament that can make the Elite Eight. But also, if they lost in the round of 32, I don't think we would be surprised either. Except for Michigan State, because they are going to be a 2 seed. So this is going to be, I think, one of the best, most fun, most entertaining Big Ten tournaments that we've had in quite some time. So I'm tuned up. I'm ready. 3:30 today. Not Rutgers, USC. That's the game at 8:30. Northwestern at Minnesota. 3:30 at Gamebridge. It's going to be great. So glad to get this tournament underway. In terms of odds, Michigan State is the favorite at plus 250. Maryland, second favorite at plus 370. And then there's several teams hovering around that plus 700 or plus 750 mark. Once again, I think this is going to be a great tournament. It is Wednesday, which means it's over the hump day, brought to you by Mike Woodson's just relentless journey of getting his teams over the hump.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike? Leslie, guess what today is?
It's hump day.
Woo-hoo! Hump day!
As the coach, I gotta get us over that hump. I gotta get them comfortable, knowing that you're gonna be in close games and you gotta make plays coming down the home stretch. I mean, in the tournament, we were right there. I just didn't get them over the hump, man. And that's something that I live with every day of my life. Because I truly believe that was the team to really make some noise and get to the finals, and I just couldn't get them over the hump.
Mike Woodson right there, just, remembering all the times that he couldn't get his teams over the hump, from his time in the NBA to his time at Indiana. And I don't know where they sit in all of this. I think that in order for them to be perfectly solidified in the NCAA tournament, they have to beat Oregon tomorrow afternoon. That game starts at noon, by the way. Okay. If they can win that one game, then I'd call that a success because Oregon's a good team. This gives them another quad one win. I do think that Oregon's a really tough matchup for Indiana with big old Nate Biddle sitting in the middle of that defense. Malik Reneau really struggled in that game against Oregon. Okay, and if they can beat Oregon, then they play Michigan State, and obviously they can beat Michigan State. If they can beat, the Spartans on the road in East Lansing, then they can definitely beat them at Gainbridge Fieldhouse right down the street. From there, it's too many variables to kind of figure out who they're going to play from there. The point is, if they beat Oregon tomorrow, then they're probably in the NCAA tournament. If they beat Oregon and Michigan State, undoubtedly in. I don't think that you'd be able to argue against that resume, a road win at Michigan State, a neutral site win against Michigan State, and a win against Purdue. Those three wins would be better than just about every other great win that opposing bubble teams have to offer. Plus, Indiana, no bad losses. Undefeated in quad 2, quad 3, and quad 4 games. So they're one win away from probably being in. 2 wins away from definitely being in. The question is, can Mike Woodson get them over the hump? Can they bounce back, beat Oregon, who beat them in a really close game a couple weeks ago? I think Oregon ended up winning that game by 9, but the game was much, much closer than that. Indiana did what Indiana does, and they just kind of fell apart down the stretch. So hopefully they can correct that, and they can play better coming up when they play Oregon tomorrow. Once again, that game is set to start at noon. Purdue, they can win the Big Ten tournament. They are good enough to do it. They're talented enough to do it. Okay, like they're going to play the winner of Rutgers and USC tomorrow. They're going to win that one because Rutgers and USC aren't very good. If they win that one, then they'll play Michigan, who's struggling right now. 2-4 in their last 6. Dusty May signed that extension and was like, you know what? I never have to win another basketball game ever again. I can play these games and we can lose and I can get fired and they got to pay me all that money. So we're good. So if Purdue beats, the winner of USC and Rutgers, they play Michigan, a team that they can definitely beat. And then if the seeding holds, they would play Maryland, and Maryland would probably play Illinois if I remember the bracket correctly. Okay, and Maryland, that's a good team. Purdue beat them way, way, way early in the season. Maryland's gotten better since then. Not convinced that Purdue has. So Purdue, they're talented enough to win it. I don't think they will. I think that they'll probably win 2 games, and then that'll kind of be it. Because with all these games coming, consecutively, I just kind of expect for Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn to run out of gas at some point. To bear as much weight offensively as Trey Kaufman-Renn and Braden Smith do is a lot. Doing it twice a week is a lot. But doing it on Thursday and then Friday and then Saturday and then Sunday, 4 days in a row, that is a lot of minutes. Braden Smith's going to play 40 minutes in every game that they play in. Trey Kaufman-Renn's probably going to play 30 to 35 if he can stay out of foul trouble. And with just the heavy minutes and the heavy usage that those two guys have, they're going to run out of gas at some point during the Big Ten tournament. The hope is Purdue can win a game or 2 before that happens. Okay, so Purdue probably going to win a game or 2. I don't think that they would win a 3rd. I think that's just, like I said, that's just a lot to ask of Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn. Indiana, that game tomorrow I think is going to be really good, really close. They're playing Oregon at noon. We'll see how that game looks. And then they'll probably lose to Michigan State if they're even able to get by Oregon, which they obviously very much need to do in order to solidify that, appearance in the NCAA tournament. When we come back at 11 o'clock, Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, he is set to join the show. Daniel Jones, the latest addition to the Indianapolis Colts, and I'm not excited about it. I don't think Zach is either, but we're going to cover it, and it's going to be good because anytime you talk quarterbacks in any football market, it's good stuff. So Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts is set to join me when we come back at 11 o'clock.
Texting enrolls you into recurring automated text messages. Consent not required to purchase. Message and data rates may apply.
Hey, Dan, how you doing? Haven't seen you around the gym.
Yeah, I've really fallen off. Since I turned 40, I just don't get the results I used to get.
Could be lower testosterone. I went through it a while back. I got Nugenix Total T, and it's made a huge difference for me.
I've seen that ad on TV. Is it for real?
Oh, yeah. The key ingredient is something called Tesnor, which helps boost free and total testosterone levels to help you trim up and stay lean.
And it's made a difference for you?
Man, I feel like I'm in my 20s again, at work, in the gym, and in the bedroom.
Are they still giving out complimentary bottles for people to try for themselves?
Yeah, you just need to send them a text. Text CUT to 42424 right now for your complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T. Plus, text now and we'll include a bottle of Nugenix Thermo, our most powerful fat incinerator ever, to help you get back into shape fast, absolutely free. Text CUT to 42424. That's CUT to 42424.
Products and statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease or illness.
Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket, 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
What's going on? Welcome back to the real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you guys have had a nice week. It's Wednesday. Get over the hump day in honor of Mike Woodson. Indiana's set to play tomorrow, but the Colts are in the news, spending money, which we've never really seen them do. Joined now by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts to talk about the Colts' new spending habits. Well, I don't know if I call it a habit quite yet. More of like spending outlier. Zach, what's going on, man? How are you?
Feeling pretty good, man. I kind of came into free agency thinking that the Colts were going to address the defensive backs in free agency. I was like, yeah, I fully expected. In my latest mock draft, I even didn't have the Colts taking a corner or a safety because I expected them to address defensive back in free agency, but I didn't expect these two level of signings. The two guys they grabbed, the money they spent on day one. I mean, I know there's a lot of funny money in there, but if you look at just the Ward and Bynum contracts, I mean, the Colts are dealing out over the next 3 to 4 years for both these guys. It's like a $60 million commitment to Ward. I think it's 60 for both, right? So $120 million for those guys if they hit every single, incentive in there. So that's a lot of money for a team that typically doesn't spend in free agency. So, you know what? Credit to Ballard, I guess, for the first time in years where, you know what? He went out there and he saw the need and he addressed it and he threw money at it.
Yeah, and I'm with you, which when he looked at this Colts roster and all of the free agents that they had, because I think the number was 18 free agents.
Yeah.
It was like they can't address all of this in the draft. They're going to have to spend money. And I, like you, assumed it'd be low-level starters, so that the guys that Chris Ballard drafted would still be, the favorites to start. But like you said, he's really forked out money. And the Colts secondary looks like it looks like an NFL secondary now. There's real depth there. And there's some guys that I really like. Cam Bynum, he seems very versatile in terms of he can cover man-to-man. He can play zone. I think he fits the run well, just kind of from what I saw from Minnesota. So I'm probably more excited about him than Ward. But yeah, man, I can't wait. And I do want to talk about those guys, but we have to start with Daniel Jones. When it broke, what was your reaction? Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts.
It's funny. I'm someone who I don't really like surprises. So I was lucky enough when it came to this that, we kind of expected it coming. I feel like you don't need to be an insider or anything like that to kind of know that it was heading this way. It was kind of hinted at that it was going to come down to Minnesota or Indy for Daniel Jones. And even just thinking about that logically, it's of course he's going to pick Indy because there's a better chance for him here in Indy to get some snaps and get some starts. So I was luckily prepared for Daniel Jones to sign with the Colts. Now, again, maybe it's just me because I see a lot of people being optimistic about this signing. But even if we take the cap hit out of the equation, which is honestly my biggest complaint, is just how much money they're giving Daniel Jones. But even if we just look at the player, I just don't love the fit at all in Indy. I mean, Daniel Jones, a guy who just hasn't looked like an NFL caliber quarterback the last couple of years. I know that team has been really bad, but the quarterback is a part of the team. The quarterback's the main part of the team. And when I watch those games, it reminds me of how the Colts offense was looking late in that Carson Wentz season, where it just looked like a play caller terrified of his quarterback. It looked like a quarterback with no confidence and just no real upside or ability even. So I just was not a fan of those last couple of years of Daniel Jones in New York. And honestly, in my opinion, I think this is going to be the worst veteran quarterback that Shane Steichen's had in Indy. And I'm not even saying that to prop up Joe Flacco or Gardner Minshew, but at least with Minshew, you knew the RPO game was going to be deadly with Minshew. You knew that the mesh throws and the underneath throws were going to be pretty good. And you knew with Minshew that he could make some BS happen when he rolls out of the pocket and throws it off his back foot and it somehow goes where it needs to go. And with Joe Flacco, at least the vertical ball is going to be there. with Daniel Jones, I see this passive quarterback who has the same pocket presence as Gardner Minshew, but doesn't have the same like RPO ability or quick game ability. A guy who's passive when it comes to throwing the football and will rely on his legs too much, and he's really not that great of an athlete anyway. So, yeah, I don't love this signing whatsoever. For me personally, I would have gone back to Minshew before I went to Daniel Jones. I would have gone to Brissett or Jameis. Like, those guys are at least cheaper, and I'm not convinced they're not better than Daniel Jones. So in a free agency period for the Colts where I'm very, very happy about what they've done overall, the guys they brought back, the guys they brought in, this was kind of a whiff for me. And especially when you look at the cap hit. I mean, it's almost $14 million in this one season for Daniel Jones. That's kind of absurd to me. So, yeah, I mean, look, I want to be positive as possible. That's why I was trying to direct you away from Daniel Jones to start this radio hit here, man. But I can't really swing this signing in a positive light in my head.
I'm with you. I do not like this at all. I feel like it was honestly just a waste of money. Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts talking Daniel Jones to the Colts. Because like I'm with you. Like you could have gotten Minshew, who's cheaper, and has had success here before. I think that's really kind of the guy that him or Justin Fields. Those are the two guys that I really wanted. I do think that the reason why they paid him so much is because I do think that he was fine going back to Minnesota and doing the whole quarterback rehab thing where like if you play for Kevin O'Connell or Kyle Shanahan long enough, everyone's like, oh, you're like cured now. And then like they're willing to bring you in. The one, like if you want to spin it positive, I do think Daniel Jones is a high-end backup. Do you agree with that?
I think he's fine as a backup. I don't know. Like the bar for backup is so low that sure, I think if he gets into a good stretch, he can be a high-end backup. But I'm not even convinced he can be a high-end backup. Like I'm really just not there with him right now. Maybe he can turn it around, but even watching his best year with the Giants, like a lot of the success that season was because Dabble told him, like, make your first read or run. Like, that's your entire process as a quarterback. And once teams figured that out late in the season, he turned into Daniel Jones again. So I don't know. I don't see it. And I think people look at the interception numbers like, oh, he doesn't throw that many interceptions, but he fumbles a lot, like a lot of fumbles. So it's like he still turns the ball over a ton. So I don't know. I don't see it with Daniel Jones. I'm not convinced that Jacoby Brissett's not a better quarterback even than him. I don't even think Brissett's a good quarterback. It's just, I think you could have got him at $4 million a year and you probably could have got the same caliber of quarterback, which is not good. So, I get it for the optics. Like the Colts backed themselves into a corner by saying that we need to have a competition, and you couldn't sell competition with Jacoby Brissett. You couldn't even sell it with Gardner Minshew. So this is at least one way to sell it because Daniel Jones was a former top 10 pick who's had, I'm sure he got into the Pro Bowl that one season. So he's had that Pro Bowl pedigree, I guess. So I think
he's won a playoff game.
This better. Yeah, won a playoff game. Yeah, so I think you could sell this a little bit better optically, but I don't know. For me personally, it's just not for me. I would have rather spent that money on something else and really just gone in one more time with this Richardson thing. And then if it didn't work, then so be it, Yeah,
because like you said, the Colts backed themselves into a corner. And the other thing is like Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen kind of have to win this year, especially Ballard. And so that's part of why I think that they spent the money that they did. I'm with you. Like when I saw Joey Bosa sign a deal for 1 year, $12.6 million with the Bills yesterday, I was like, geez, I would have much rather have spent that $14 million on Daniel Jones on a guy like Joey Bosa. Because my philosophy, which, I guess I think it's right because it's mine, but you can tell me what you think, is like, if Anthony Richardson is great, that is the best thing for the Colts, which I think everyone would agree with. But if Anthony Richardson comes out and he's terrible next year, that's the second best thing for the Colts, because then you go 3-14 and then you draft Arch Manning or whoever else you really like. And my thing is, like, now, if Anthony Richardson isn't good, then like you put Daniel Jones in, who I think Shane Steichen's a good head coach. I think he'll figure it out with whoever plays quarterback for him this year. Now, though, like if you then insert Daniel Jones and you go 7-10, like you've got what, like the 12th pick in the draft, and you're not getting whatever quarterback you want. Is that, like, am I wrong to think that that's how the Colts should have approached this season?
I think organizationally, you're right that they should have approached it as boom or bust with Richardson. If we win with him, awesome, he's our guy. If we lose with him, which is probably more likely at this point, then we move on. But I think in terms of just the survivability for Ballard and for Steichen, it's definitely not the way that they would view it, where they're going to view it as, hey, if Richardson fails, we still need to keep our job. So we need somebody that can keep us our job, essentially. So if they want to hitch their wagon to Daniel Jones, which again, in my opinion, I would rather sign a Jameis and bring back Will Fries than have Daniel Jones and no Will Fries. Whatever, if they view the Daniel Jones as just that caliber of quarterback, then for their own survivability, it makes sense to go get Daniel Jones. But organizationally, like if we had control of, like if the owner was the one calling all the shots, then absolutely your philosophy is 100% correct there.
Okay. So obviously, $14 million for Daniel Jones, it's a lot, but it's not a lot for a quarterback in general. Does the fact that the deal is only for 1 year, does that tell you anything about like any sort of leaning towards like Anthony Richardson to be the starter this year or not?
I think for me, when I, like, even with the money being, a decent amount of money for him to come in here, my overall thought process on it all is it's not really a competition by any means with these two. It's Anthony Richardson versus himself. Like, sure, if Richardson comes into camp and he's just not performing well, then he's not going to be the starter. Like, simple as that. But as long as Richardson is doing his thing and he's progressing, it doesn't matter. Like, Daniel Jones could come into camp looking like prime Peyton Manning, and they won't give him that chance unless Richardson blows it. So I think Daniel Jones knows that, and I think that's why he decided to come here, because look, odds are Richardson's going to blow it. He's been benched. He's been injured every single year of his pro career and even college career at this point. So I think it's a safe bet that Daniel Jones is making here. But I don't think this is like a real competition or anything like that. I do think it's Richardson's job, but the leash is going to be short this year. And I think, again, Daniel Jones knows that. So like the 1 year deal for Jones, I think it really is like, look, I'm going to get at least 6, 7, 8 games this season, if not more. If Richardson isn't on top of his stuff this offseason. So I think it's a safe bet for Jones to get in there and get some snaps, and it's on Richardson to keep his job and hopefully become the quarterback that we all thought he could be when the Colts drafted him.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, talking Colts free agency and Daniel Jones. I'm with you. I'd be very surprised if Anthony Richardson was not the starter week 1, but I do think that the opportunity for Daniel Jones to take the job is going to come weeks 3 through 7 when Anthony Richardson's out with some sort of rib thing, Yeah.
And I think, again, like it's a good bet from Jones, because even if Richardson comes in looking like a new quarterback and looks like a superstar in training camp, and say he tears it up the first 3-4 weeks, odds are he's going to get hurt. Like he's always been hurt. So if Jones can come in that time and catch fire and play some really good quarterback, I mean, will the Colts go away from Jones? Probably not at that point, because they need to win games and they need to make the playoffs. So it's a good bet from Jones. I completely understand why he wanted to be here, because, he's going to get playing time regardless of what Richardson does this year. Because, again, odds are at this point he's going to get hurt. It's kind of like banking on Jelani Woods or Juju Brents at this point. Like, Richardson's probably going to get hurt at some point.
So moving on to the other guys that the Colts assigned. I know you said that at the top of this, you said that you were surprised that the Colts spent the money that they did and that they got these caliber of players. But what are your actual thoughts on Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward as players?
Yeah, Charvarius Ward. So I had an inkling going into free agency that the Colts were going to be very interested in him, and interest in actually landing the free agent is very different from the Colts. Like, I had an inkling last year that they were going to be interested in the safety from the Giants, and they weren't able to get the job done. So I knew they were going to be in on Charvarius Ward, but even in my head, I was like, they're going to get outbid by Washington or New York or someone, and they weren't going to finish the job there. But Ward was a guy where he just fit every single thing that made sense for a Ballard splash signing. I mean, Ballard doesn't really commit a ton of money unless he's comfortable with the player, and he's shown that he's been comfortable with players from Kansas City and San Fran in the past. Where did Charvarius Ward play his last two destinations? Kansas City and San Fran. So two organizations that Ballard feels comfortable grabbing guys from because he's comfortable with the people who run those organizations and such. So those lined up in terms of just the height, weight, speed, and the playmaking, former All-Pro. I mean, Charvarius Ward was everything the Colts were looking for in a cornerback one. So I'm glad they were able to get that deal done because he is just a beautiful fit in this defense going forward. And then Bynum, you know, he's not the prototypical free safety. Like, he's not a Jesse Bates where he's going to be this super rangy, roaming free safety over the top, but he's so versatile. He can play in the box. He can play over the top. He has great ball skills, great explosion. Kind of one way that I described him is like he's basically what Julian Blackmon was supposed to be for the Colts when they drafted him years ago before the injuries just took their toll on Julian Blackmon. It's kind of what he looks like. And like Blackmon, he was a cornerback in college. You know, he was an outside corner in college. Actually, I actually remember a couple of years ago writing about day three corners that fit the Colts. And I was like, oh yeah, this Bynum guy, like, not the best athlete, but he's so physical, so tenacious. And I just love that in my corners. And then years later, he gets moved to safety for the Vikings, and now he's here in Indy. So I just love what they're bringing in from the leadership perspective of these two players, the personalities, and just what they can do on the field. I mean, these are playmakers that can take the ball away. And one thing I've said on Locked On Colts the last couple of days is you go from a secondary where Jalen Jones and Nick Cross were your second and third best players in that secondary last year, you know, behind Kenny Moore. Now this next season, those two are your weak links. And I feel much more comfortable with those guys being your weak links than those guys being your best players in your secondary. It's like with offensive line, you're only as good as your weakest link. So if your weakest link on your offensive line is LaRaven Clark, for instance, you can somewhat hide that, but if LaRaven Clark's your best guy on the offensive line, then there's something really going wrong with your offensive line. And I'm not saying that Jones and all these guys are like LaRaven Clark, but like, it's fine if you can hide the one, like those guys being like your worst, and those guys aren't even bad players. So I think this is perfectly good for the Colts. Like, Jones and Nick Cross can be role players rather than forcing these young guys who are 23, 24 years old to be your best defenders. You know, let Bynum be that. Let Charvarius Ward be that. Let Kenny be that. And then let these guys just make their spare plays every now and then. So this just makes the Colts secondary so much better, adds experience, adds ball skills to the defense. And I think the Colts secondary goes from arguably the worst in the league to like bottom 5 in the league to at least being above average at this point, if not like a top 10 secondary in football, in my opinion.
Yeah, joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, talking about the additions of Cam Bynum and Charvarius Ward to this Colts secondary. The other thing is they have real depth now. Like, if someone gets hurt, you know, Juju Brents, who isn't the most reliable person in the world, like he can step in and you feel pretty okay about it. You know, Samuel Womack, like, he can step in and you feel pretty okay about it because they aren't, you know, like your best corner, you know, just exactly like what you were saying. So you mentioned earlier that you did a mock draft and how you didn't have them drafting any secondary players because you figured that they would address it in free agency. So who did you have them taking with that 14th pick, and how do you think they're going to kind of prioritize their draft after Will Fries leaves for a whole lot of money up there in Minnesota?
Yeah, so the mock draft I actually had, which is funny because I think these are the three biggest needs going to the draft, is I had them going Jahad Campbell at 14, the linebacker from Alabama. Then I had Mason Taylor, the tight end from LSU in round 2. And then I had Tate Ratledge, the super athletic offensive lineman from Georgia with a mullet. If you guys haven't seen
let's go.
If you guys haven't seen the Freebird edit that somebody did of him running his 40, somebody put Freebird over top of it. It's so good. So yeah, Tate Ratledge, like that was an instant Chris Ballard fit right there because of the mullet and just how athletic he was at the combine. But yeah, no, I think those are probably their three biggest needs, where it's just you want to get just a legit playmaking linebacker in here alongside Zaire Franklin. For me, I went Campbell at 14 because Campbell can rush off the edge. He can play over the middle. He's got great eyes, super, super athletic, and he's only 20 years old. So like what he can be by the end of his rookie contract, like I think this guy's got potential to be a top 5, top 3 linebacker in the sport. So I took the swing on Campbell there in that mock draft. But tight end is obviously their biggest need. Like, no doubt about it right now. Drew Ogletree and Albert O and Will Mallory are their 3 tight ends on the roster. So they certainly need an actual tight end or 2 going forward at this point. So if they take a Tyler Warren or a Colston Loveland, or like they did in this mock draft, they took Mason Taylor in round 2, that's probably going to be their starter next season. So I think tight end and linebacker are probably their biggest needs. And then after that, it's really just trench depth. Like they need more offensive linemen in the room to compete and fight for starting jobs. Like right now, I think they have their 5 on their O-line, but they don't really have anybody behind those guys. And then on the D-line, they have to replace the loss of Dio Dangbo, and you just need to add pass rushers whenever you can. Like just keep adding pass rushers, keep adding defensive tackles to this room. So they're in a much better place than what they were going into free agency because they addressed the secondary, but there's still a lot of work to be done when it comes to this roster.
Joined by Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts, talking about just this Colts offseason, all the free agents in the draft, which is like a month and a half away, which is crazy. I want to throw a trade at you. It won't happen, but I like to dream, So the Raiders, it had been mocked a fairly decent amount that Shedeur Sanders would fall and they would take him at 6. But obviously they make this trade for Geno Smith. They don't need that anymore. They need help on defense. Like that's kind of their thing. Colts trade up from 14 up to 6 to take Tyler Warren before the Jets grab him at 7. What do you think?
I mean, I think it'd be fine. Like at this point, the Colts are having an aggressive offseason. So for me, like Warren's not really worth the 6th overall pick and certainly not worth a trade up in my opinion. Like I think he's a really good prospect, but I don't think he's in the same tier as like a Brock Bowers was last year. But also when you look at the Colts needs and you look at what they just need to do going this next season, I'm not going to throw a hissy fit over trading up for Tyler Warren. Yeah. It's kind of like the way I compare it is like years ago when the Colts took Jonathan Taylor in round 2, they traded up for Jonathan Taylor in round 2 when they had Marlon Mack and they had Nyheim Hines. And I think Jordan Wilkins was back at that point too. I was sitting there being like, well, they don't really need a running back. Like I like the guys they have on the roster, but at the end of the day, Taylor's awesome. Like he's a really good player and he's going to be able to step in here and be a really good player for the team. So yeah, I can be overly analytical about it and be like, oh no, don't trade up for a running back. Don't do this. But you're getting a good player on your football team. So I think if they were to trade up for a Tyler Warren, I'd kind of be in the same boat where like, yeah, analytically, don't trade up for a tight end, especially top 10 tight ends. Typically don't work out. You get scared of the Kyle Pitts dilemma that's happening in Atlanta. But like at the end of the day, you're getting a good player on your football team. And the Colts just need good players. Sometimes it's as simple as that when it comes down to evaluating football and evaluating your favorite team. So going up and getting the good player, like even if you have to overpay to get it, I'll take that. Give me a good player on a rookie contract with the 5th-year flexibility. Yeah, I'll absolutely take that. So not complaining whatsoever if they move up for Tyler Warren.
I would love it. Like he's not the same level of receiver as Brock Bowers, but I think he's just more of a two-way tight end, whereas like Brock Bowers blocking isn't like he's fine. Like he can do it, but he's not as dominant as some of these other guys. And I think Tyler Warren could be a legitimate two-way tight end, both in blocking and pass catching. But we'll see. I'm very excited to kind of see what the Colts do with that pick. I read this morning, I think Chappie had it on Twitter. The Colts have somewhere around like $11 million left in cap space. That's not including, or that doesn't reflect the Braden Smith revision, whatever they ended up doing with him. Who should the Colts look to sign kind of with this small amount of money that they have left?
Yeah, so if they only do have 11, which it's going to be more than that because Braden Smith's not factored into that, but if it were only 11, they wouldn't really be able to do anything because you'd have to account for the draft pick and just they have to bring in bodies because I think they're at 66 players on the roster right now. They have to get up to 90 before training camp, so they would need that just for vet minimums and stuff like that. But I do expect with the Braden Smith restructure that I think it's going to be like they freed up like maybe 10 million more in there. And obviously they can free up even more by restructuring Buckner and restructuring Michael Pittman Jr. So they can free up space if they need it. In terms of what they're going to go after, I don't expect any more big moves from them. I don't think we're going to see like a Trey Hendrickson trade. I know everyone really wants it, but I would put that very, very unlikely as happening at this point. But in terms of what other moves we could see, like I do think they're going to be in the edge market. I think they're going to be in that inside out edge rusher market, like a Charles Omenihu type players, a Darius Smith. Like I'm not saying they're going after those guys, but those type of players who can rush on the interior or on the outside and be productive to replace what they're losing in Dayo Dengbo. And I think we'll see some capable vets coming in here on both the offense and defense. Like I wouldn't be shocked to see a tight end that's been here, done that, coming to Indy, maybe like a Chris Manhertz or something from the Giants, a guy who can block, a guy who can catch a little bit. And then you gotta say a couple Lou Anarumo type guys will come. Like I'd be very shocked if Von Bell doesn't end up here in Indy at some point, just because he's always been with Lou Anarumo and his best years have come with Lou Anarumo. So I still expect maybe 3, 4, 5 outside signings from the Colts prior to the draft. Maybe they won't be big signings, like 2 or 3 of them might be vet minimum type deals, but I do expect them to continue adding to this roster because, again, they're at like 66 players. They have to at least get up into like the 70s before the draft because, you have to fill your roster at this point. So I think they will bring in some more guys. I don't think they're completely done with free agency yet.
Zach Hicks of Locked On Colts joining the show. Last question for you, Zach, and I will let you go. Who's the free agent that got away? Who's the guy that you really wanted Chris Ballard to go sign but didn't, or re-sign, I guess, if you wanted to go with Will Fries?
Yeah. I mean, my heart says Will Fries, man. That's been my guy for so long. I mean, I had a friendship with him since before he got drafted. When the Colts took him, I was doing flips in my office, like, oh my gosh, they took my guy. And then over the years, just built up a good friendship with him and got to know his family a little bit too. Really, really pleasant people. So I'm just so happy for him to get the bag. And it's funny. I was saying before free agency, like this could be Ballard's biggest mistake in free agency, letting him walk, because there's just no reason to let a 27-year-old ascending player hit the market and leave your team. But when you see that they allocated the resources to Ward and Bynum, I'm fine with it. I mean, it hurts, but I'm perfectly fine with it. But Will Fries in my heart is the one that got away because that's just my guy. In terms of other players, let's see who has signed. I mean, honestly, getting Bynum at that deal is pretty nice, because I was going to say like a Trayvon Morrig or someone like that, like maybe like a different type of safety, but I don't know. Bynum's kind of a good fit and fits what they really are looking for on the back end. Maybe at like linebacker, like I did like the idea of like a Cody Barton, who went to Tennessee for like a 3-year, $21 million contract. Like I just liked him as like a floor raiser for the defense with good eyes and can play in the system. So maybe someone like that. But as of right now, I'm not really seeing one guy that got away, because when you look at the Colts' biggest needs, they kind of filled them, like outside of tight end. But I didn't want to sign any of these tight ends on the market to big contracts.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling pretty good so far. I mean, again, I don't love the Daniel Jones signing, but I'm not going to complain too much when they gave me Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum.
That's totally fair. I wanted Dre Greenlaw. That's the guy that I really wanted. He'd have been awesome. But hey, like you said, we got Cam Bynum and we got Travarius Ward. So it's kind of hard to complain. Zach, thanks for your time as always, man. You were great.
Yep. Thanks for having me, buddy.
See ya. That is Zach Hicks. You can check him out on Twitter at Zach Hicks 2. You can also check out his podcast, Locked On Colts, where he does a great job covering the Colts. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, more on this Daniel Jones signing.
The best takes. Maybe. The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket 1430 AM, 93.9 HD2, and always on the free Indy Sports Ticket app.
Welcome back to the Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Thanks for tuning in, no matter how you're tuning in, whether that's YouTube, Twitter, or that Indy Sports Ticket app, which you can download wherever you get your apps. Anthony Richardson in a quote-unquote quarterback competition with Daniel Jones. That's not really a quarterback competition because it's Anthony Richardson's. The whole point of this whole quarterback competition thing was just to get Anthony Richardson to show up a little extra motivated at training camp. Okay, this is not an open competition. It's not. It's just a way to make sure that Anthony Richardson's butt is in gear from the jump. That is the entire point of this. The Colts were never going to bring in Aaron Rodgers or anyone of his caliber because they want Anthony Richardson to be the starter. Okay, and he's going to start week 1 for the Colts. I have no doubt about it. Okay, oh, well, they say, yeah, because we can trust everything that Chris Ballard says. You're right. This is not an open competition. Is the door like slightly cracked for Daniel Jones to beat Anthony Richardson out during camp? Sure. I wouldn't deny that, but Anthony Richardson is going to get every benefit of the doubt. If Daniel Jones beats him out in camp, I'll be stunned. And it'll indicate that Anthony Richardson somehow got worse in the offseason, and it'll point to Daniel Jones somehow, some way, figuring it out. Okay? Now, with that being said, Daniel Jones will have an opportunity to win this job at some point. Okay? During the season, Anthony Richardson's going to roll his ankle, or he's not going to slide, and he's going to hurt his ribs, or he's going to he's going to become concussed, or something like that will happen. And then in those few weeks that Anthony Richardson is out because he's hurt, Daniel Jones will have an opportunity to step in and win the job, because Anthony Richardson is not going to be the quarterback of a top 5 offense in the NFL this year. It's not going to happen. If Anthony Richardson comes back and he's improved, and when I say improved, he's completing somewhere between 55 and 60% of his passes. Okay, if he comes back and he's doing that, then, I think that this Colts offense will be middle of the road, somewhere between like the, 14th and 18th best offense in the NFL. Okay, like that's kind of where I expect for this Colts offense to be with Anthony Richardson playing quarterback if he comes back and he's better. And then let's say, Anthony Richardson gets hurt, Daniel Jones steps in, all of a sudden the Colts are, they go from being, the 18th best offense in the NFL to the 11th best offense in the NFL. If that happens, congratulations, Daniel Jones. The job is yours the rest of the way. But in terms of him winning the job in training camp during this open competition, it's not going to happen. It's simply not going to happen. So if Daniel Jones wants that starting job, he's going to have to take it during the season. Okay, will that happen? I don't know. I don't think that Daniel Jones is very good. Then again, Anthony Richardson isn't very good either. So we're going to have to wait and see how all of this unfolds. We're going to continue to cover it better than anyone else in the United States right here on Indy Sports Ticket, between my show and the Dan Dockett Show. When we come back here in about 4 minutes, we're talking hoops. Pacers, Bucks last night was awesome. And then today, the Big Ten tournament starts. Braden Smith named Big Ten Player of the Year, but the Bucks Pacers game last night, I hope you watched it. It was cinema. It was amazing. My thoughts on Pacers Bucks when we come back here in about 4 minutes.
The best takes, stories, and entertainment. It's The Real Jonathan Smith Show on Indy Sports Ticket. 1430 AM and 99.5 HD2.
What's going on? Welcome back to The Real Jonathan Smith Show here on Indy's Sports Ticket. Hopefully you guys are having a nice week. Oh, man. What a day. Big Ten basketball tournament starts today. Indiana and Purdue playing tomorrow. But last night, I love the NBA. Because, like 2 or 3 times a week, it just gives you a game that you just don't want to miss because teams are going back and forth and they're scoring and the offense is crisp. And it was fun. And last night we got that game, Bucks Pacers. Game was outstanding. I told you that the game would be outstanding because both teams had a lot to play for. Nationally televised game, the only nationally televised game last night. They're tied. Both competing, trying to grab that 4 seed. By the way, 3-way tie for that right now between the Pistons, Pacers, and Bucks. These last 25 games, however many games they have left, are going to be a lot of fun. And Tyrese Halliburton saved himself from a lot of criticism by hitting that 4-point play last night to win the game, might I add. If he'd missed, everyone, including me, would have been all over him. He finished with 14 points and 10 assists. First 3 quarters, didn't even notice him. 6 points, only took 7 shots. He did have 9 assists going into the 4th quarter. So, the playmaking was good, as it always is. It's not enough, though. If you're going to be the best player on a team that wants to make a deep run in the playoffs against teams that are actually healthy, then 14 points and 10 assists just isn't good enough. I will give him credit, though. I thought he was good last night on the defensive end. But it felt like an average game from Halliburton outside of that game winner. And when you're playing against Giannis and the Bucks and Damian Lillard in a 7-game series, you can't be average like that. Luckily, the Pacers did a really good job of mitigating Giannis and his performance last night. They showed him 2 consistently because he just killed him recently. Like every time he touched the ball last night, the Pacers doubled him. They were usually doubling off of Taurean Prince because I think everyone in the NBA would be okay if Taurean Prince beat them. Giannis still had a good game, finished with 19 points, 17 rebounds, 7 assists. But that's what you want to make Giannis do. The Pacers made him a passer. And it worked for them. I mean, look, it worked for the Bucks as well. They were, they ran good offense. They scored 113 points, but that's not really that many, especially in today's NBA when you're playing against Giannis and Damian Lillard. Okay, I thought that the Pacers defense last night was excellent. It's a large part of why they won that game. The 4 verticals play at the end to set Halliburton up to hit a really tough shot over Giannis. Plus he gets fouled. He makes the free throw. His free throw form is really weird, but hey, he made it, so I don't care. It was just a great game. Giannis had been just absolutely cooking them late, before last night, in his last 14 games. He'd scored 30 or more in every game but one. He'd scored 50 or more in 3 of those 14 games. He scored 64 in 1 of them. He'd had 10-plus rebounds in every game but 1. And then last night, the Pacers, I'm not going to say that they cracked the code because Giannis still played well, but they didn't allow him to dominate the game like he had in the past, and it's a large part of why they won. That paired with the Andrew Nembhard defense. Okay, Andrew Nembhard, who, shout out to Tyrese Halliburton. If he hadn't made that shot, then I'm sure we'd be talking about Nembhard today too. Missing not 1 but 2 open threes late that would have given them the lead. To his credit, he responded well, got to the rim, got fouled, missed a free throw. Right? They ended up cutting it to 1 because he made the second one, which was obviously important because that allowed, Halliburton to hit the shot that he hit. But the real impact from Andrew Nembhard, despite him scoring 12 points and being 4 of 6 from the field, he did an excellent job guarding Damian Lillard. Held him to 15 points on 4 of 14 shooting. Okay, his impact defensively this year has been huge. It's a large part of why this Pacers defense has been so much better this year compared to last year. They have a guy in the backcourt who can just go get stops. So I thought he was good yesterday. Pascal Siakam, he had a great game, 25 points, 12 rebounds, 5 assists. Can't ask for much more from him. He really sustained the Pacers offense in those first 3 quarters when Tyrese Halliburton was non-existent in terms of his ability to score the basketball. So he's been just so great for the Pacers this last year and a half. Okay, and he was big once again last night. Not only in the first 3 quarters was he good, but to start the fourth quarter is some of the best basketball I've seen him play. And that's like going back to his time in Toronto and his time here in Indianapolis. When you score or assist on all 11 of your team's points to open the fourth quarter, I just don't think that you can really play much better than that. And that's exactly what he did. He did a great job just generating so many good looks, making the right pass, scoring when he needed to, hitting open threes. He's shooting over 40% from 3 this year for the first time in his career. He was 3 of 7 last night. He's just been amazing for them. Okay, and he was last night. And then, of course, the Pacers aren't the Pacers without that bench unit, which was once again amazing. They had 3 guys come off the bench and score in double figures. Benedict Mathurin had 17. Thomas Bryant had 10. TJ McConnell had 12. It was a great TJ McConnell game. 12 points, 7 assists, 4 steals, had a couple little spurts where he just kind of took over the game. So really good game from the Pacers last night. Hopefully they can keep it rolling. They play the 76ers on Friday, and then they're on the road at Milwaukee, the last matchup with them on the season. Need to win that one, tie that season series up at 2 apiece. That'd be really, really big for them. More basketball today. Conference tournaments are in full swing. The Big Ten tournament starts today. Northwestern at Minnesota. That game at 3:30. And then Purdue fans, Rutgers, USC. That game's tonight at around 8:30. Purdue gets the winner of that game. Shouldn't matter. They should beat whoever they wind up playing between those 2 teams. But before the tournament officially starts, here's my prediction. I think Wisconsin wins the tournament because they're the best offensive team in the Big Ten right now. Like they score the ball better than anyone else. And I just think that when you can score the ball consistently in college basketball, you can beat everyone that you play against. So I'm going to take them. They also guard pretty well. John Tonji's had a great year. So I'm picking them to win the tournament. The player of the tournament, since I'm taking Wisconsin, I kind of have to go with John Tonji. And I think this is going to be one of the best Big Ten tournaments we've seen in a long time. Because it feels like all these teams are hovering around the same level. In previous years, Purdue last year is a great example. They were clearly good enough to make the Final Four. There's not a team like that in the Big Ten this year. Sure, Michigan's good. They're going to be a 2 seed, and when you're a 2 seed, you have a chance to do it. But I don't think anyone's been overwhelmingly impressed by them. They aren't on the same level as the Auburns and Dukes of college basketball this year. They aren't. And the Big Ten is just made up of all these teams that if they made it to the Elite 8, you wouldn't be surprised. But also if they lost in the round of 32, you wouldn't be surprised. If Michigan State lost in the round of 32, I would be surprised. But all the other teams, not really. If Maryland, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Purdue, Oregon even, if all those teams made runs to the Elite 8, that wouldn't be shocking because those are good basketball teams. And at the same time, though, if they lost in the round of 32, I don't think that'd be the most surprising thing either because they're not great basketball teams. They're just good. So I'm excited. I think this Big Ten tournament is going to be nothing short of amazing. I don't know where Indiana really sits in all of this. They're plus a lot to win the tournament. Meanwhile, Michigan State's the favorite at plus 250, Maryland plus 370, and then there's just several teams around plus 700 or plus 750. It's going to be a great tournament because there's so many teams that I think are good enough to win it. Indiana's not one of them. If they win one game, I think they're really happy. If they beat Oregon tomorrow, call that a success because if you beat them, then you're probably in the NCAA tournament. Oregon's a good team. Okay, I think they're a tough matchup for Indiana with big Nate Biddle sitting there in the middle of that defense. I'll talk about this a bit more tomorrow, but Malik Reneau really struggled to score against Oregon in that meeting last week, 2 weeks ago, whenever it was. And look, if they beat Oregon, which they definitely can, then they turn it around and they play Michigan State, who they can beat, right? Like they beat them in East Lansing. If they can beat them there, then they can definitely beat them at Cambridge here in Indianapolis, which is basically going to be a home game for Indiana. Also, Indiana playing at noon tomorrow against Oregon. So if they win that game, Michigan State's a winnable game. I don't think anyone really expects them to win that game, though. So if they can win one, that's great. Then you're probably in the NCAA tournament. If you win two, though, if you beat Oregon and you beat Michigan State, you're a lock. You are in the NCAA tournament. So we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they win tomorrow and there are no bid stealers, because that's really what Indiana is concerned about right now. You're concerned about bid stealers, teams that shouldn't win their conference tournament, winning it, and then pushing one of those bubble teams out. So the hope is that Indiana does not get pushed out. For Purdue, they play the late game tomorrow night against the winner of USC and Rutgers tonight. They can win the Big Ten tournament. They're good enough to do it. They're talented enough to do it. But absolutely not. They are not going to win the Big Ten tournament. I would be very surprised if they did. Look, they're a good team. Trey Coffin-Wren, Braden Smith are two really good players. It's a lot to ask, I think, of Braden Smith and Trey Coffin-Wren to carry this offense twice a week. For them to win the Big Ten tournament, they'd have to do it like 4 times, 4 days in a row, which is quite a bit. Okay, so we'll wait around. We'll see kind of what they end up looking like. I just kind of expect for Braden Smith and Trey Coffin-Wren to run out of gas at some point during this Big Ten tournament. We'll see how they progress. But I can't wait. I think it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. It starts today, 3:30. I think all 3 games today are on Peacock. For the game tomorrow, I don't know. You should just go to the game and you should listen to the Real Jonathan Smith Show on your drive in. I'm gonna have you ready to go for Oregon and Indiana. Also going to throw in some Colts conversation in there as well, because this is not the Indiana pregame show. It's just the reality of it. They're playing on the Big Ten Network tomorrow. Can't wait. Hopefully they win. Hopefully you stick around for the Dan Dockett Show. Ryan Burr, Mark Boyle. Those are the 2 guests lined up for today. It's going to be a great show. Thanks for taking the time out of your day to tune into my show. We'll be right back here tomorrow, 10 a.m., getting you ready for Indiana and Oregon. I will talk to you tomorrow starting at 10 a.m.